And screen share. Give me just a second, guys. They keep updating things and moving things around on me. There we go. Oh, and now I'm stuck here. Okay, can we see our presentation?
We are good.
All right. Okay, so, oops, and I'm already messing it up. Here we go. All right, guys. So thank you for joining us today for our installment of our Humane Communities Education Series. If you've been with us before, we do these throughout the year, kind of sporadically, since we have some other virtuals that we like to host for you guys on different things. But our Humane Communities, overall, if you haven't joined one of these before, it's us talking about different parts of our organization that you might not have heard about, or you would like more information about, some different topics that you might hear people, communicating about, but maybe you don't know that much about. And we just want to make sure that we fill in our volunteers and fosters with this information so you guys are as well equipped with knowledge as you can be. So if at any time you have questions, please ask. But like I mentioned, myself, Ashley Ray, and Jennifer Rosen are on the call today for you guys. Okay. So some of the objectives we want to go over today, the different types of adoption processes. So we obviously have our own, other organizations have their own. They might go over, they might have different names, different ways that they work. So we want to kind of talk about that and how we differ at Michigan Humane specifically and why. And obviously talking about open adoption and what that means and why we use it. And then some common myths, misconceptions, maybe some frequently asked questions that people come across when they hear that we have open adoption, and then your guys' questions. So again, at any time, please feel free to drop questions into the chat. And before we go to the next slide, I just want to kind of put some feelers out. If anybody would like to share in the chat what you maybe know about open adoption or what that means. If you guys want to drop anything in there, Jen will tell me what you say. But what do you know so far? Give you guys just a few minutes.
Don't be shy, guys. There's no wrong or right answers. I appreciate your honesty. Lisa says nothing.
Hey, that's all
That's
right.
good. Sue says the same. Ditto.
Okay. I
Any
appreciate that.
guesses? Cara said no application. Jan and Debbie said they're the same. They're not sure. Barb said maybe. Question mark.
I really appreciate you guys being honest because that tells me that we need this presentation and we need this conversation, so that you guys can feel a little more confident in knowing what open adoption is. So I hope that this helps. Okay. So first, before we jump into what open adoption is, I just want to take a moment to kind of talk about the different types of adoption processes, because I know a lot of our volunteers have worked with other organizations, they've volunteered other places, they've seen our partners come to events with us and have different processes than us. So everybody works a little bit differently, and it depends on a lot of different things. So some people might have an application that they require ahead of time, whether that's online or for you to fill out in person. When you come to the shelter, sometimes people do an application process on site and then still have to kind of have a waiting period. Some other places do pre-scheduled meetings with adoption counselors, so they might come in and communicate a little bit about how the process might look like for an animal if they're interested in already, talking through, things in a specifically scheduled meeting time. Some places require home visits. And I do want to add that some of this might be different for each individual animal as well, at different organizations. They might require a home visit for, say, an animal who has special needs, but might not require a home visit for another animal. So it can be widely varied depending on the organization and the animal itself. And some of them offer consultations and then open adoption, which is what Michigan Humane has. So some of the factors that influence the type of adoption process that organizations might have, and these are just some, I'm sure I'm not touching on all of them here, but some of it is the type of organization. There might be, specific things that they're looking for as their organization, depending on the size that they are or the type of animals that they have come through. Rescues, I know there's sometimes confusion between like what's a shelter, what's a rescue. Generally speaking, shelters are larger organizations and rescues are smaller. Sometimes rescues are handled fully on fosters, people that are just working out of their own hearts and home, and they need to make sure that these animals who they fostered for a while are going into a specific home. Michigan Humane partners with rescues a lot too, so you might hear that throughout just your time being at the shelter that we might send animals to rescue. And I think we're going to talk about that a little bit later too, of what that looks like. But they could be different just depending on what is overall their size, shape, expectations of their animals. It also can be based on community needs. So the type of animals that they have in their community might change the way that they want to do their application processes. Um, Without getting like nitty gritty, it might look different in parts of, a state that has a lot of stray dogs walking around versus maybe an area that doesn't have as many. They might need to move those animals more quickly, so their processes might take a shorter time period, where other places that don't have as many animals might have the luxury of taking a little bit longer and looking into some things a little bit deeper. Um, Animal needs, like I mentioned, might just be related to their special needs. If they are injured in some way or have health concerns, it might be dependent on that. Um, as well as the type of animal. I know I mentioned that already, but there might be places who take a little bit longer because their applications are for farm animals who need a specific type of situation that they're moving to. So that looks different there too. Time and space kind of goes with the community needs of how quickly they can move animals through and try to find them homes, without as many, restrictions if possible. And then also government requirements can come into play depending on if these different types of organizations receive funding. They might have constraints that are based on what the local government needs from them, and their expectations, and all the fun paperwork sides of things might influence the type of process they use as well.
Do you mind if I add some things, Ashley?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think it's really great how you're pointing out the different types of organizations. And yeah, a common term we use in the animal welfare field is there's a difference between a brick and mortar facility. So we actually have a building to work out of or multiple, whereas a lot of rescues or smaller organizations can be foster based. So when Ashley was talking about they are run through foster programs, it means they don't actually have a physical place for the rescue to do work. It's all volunteer run, and animals live in foster homes from the time they come in, the time they're seen by the vet, that the foster takes care of all of that. The organization just pays the bill for it, but the animal stays in their home from the time they come to the rescue until the time that they leave. So usually shelter is referring to a specific building, whereas a rescue may not, although some rescues are lucky and they do have enough resources and they're able to get a building that they are able to use. And the other thing that we didn't talk about here, though, but it's kind of under the government requirements, there's a difference between a municipal facility. So that means like an animal control versus a private nonprofit organization. So animal controls are not nonprofit facilities. They are funded through tax dollars, whether that's through the city or through the states, or various programs set to support them, and they have legal requirements, usually by the state or the city, to house and care for animals. So, for example, when we're talking about stray animals, those usually are going to municipal facilities, where Michigan Humane is a privately owned shelter, nonprofit organization. But we still partner with municipal facilities or cities that may not have the time or the space or the resources to serve all the animals in their area. So that's why we have some contracts. If you guys have ever heard us talk about that at our Westland and Detroit shelters, that's because we're partnering with cities that may not have as many resources as our organization. Usually there is some sort of fee to help with that, to help us cover the cost of care that our animals are coming in, since we're not getting any funding or programming to care for the animals. So, again, lots of crazy things that go into this. Um, and yeah, it's always ever changing and growing too in the animal welfare field.
Thank you, Jen. That was helpful. I know it's very confusing when we talk about all these different types of organizations and ways that like animals come through our doors and other doors. So I just like to take a moment. If you guys ever have questions about any of that stuff, please feel free to reach out to us because we know it is a bit confusing. Okay, so open adoption. So this is what Michigan Humane has. I think open adoption, correct me if I'm wrong, Jen, is pretty much the term that we use. Is there anything that's interchangeable that we might hear?
Yeah, I mean, really, an open adoption process is what we call it. This is based on a process that was introduced by Maddie's Fund, which is really well known in the sheltering world. And they're kind of a leader on humane practices and how to help shelters or rescue groups run the most efficient way possible to serve as many animals and humans in their community. So, yeah, that's pretty much the term we use. So if you hear us here say open adoptions, or another thing we often say is conversation based. It's not necessarily like, oh, you come in, you see the animal, you pay, and you take them home. So we're moving away from a transaction and figuring out how we develop relationships with the people who are interested in coming in and receiving an animal from our facility.
Thank you. Yeah, so Jen touched a little bit on this, but we have no formal application. So you've probably heard people going to other organizations and, before they even come in, they see a photo, they put in an application, hope they get a call. That can work, in a couple different steps there, depending on the place, but we don't have that. So we do sometimes have confusion with that when customers come in because they might have seen our animal posted on someone else's website, or on something like Pet Finder, and there might be, the wrong box ticked. So we just always like to make sure that our volunteers know that we don't run any other pages. The only one that is like consistently our information, our staff keeps it up to date is michiganhumane.org. So if you have anyone asking questions about animals that aren't in our care or anything like that, that's sometimes what happens is they find us on other external websites who are trying to help get the word out. But michiganhumane.org is what we run, and that's what we keep up to date. Um, Jen mentioned it is discussion or conversation based. So you probably see our front lobbies. We have spaces to talk to people. We like to have those discussions with people face to face as best as possible. So the minute they walk in the door, they could become interested in an animal and bring that paperwork up to our front desk. And our customer service representatives are trained to talk through the animal's individual needs, which goes into this animals have waivers. If you've ever looked at paperwork for our animals, you'll notice, there's kind of a little blurb about who they are. And then underneath there's kind of a space and then some little bullet points of what we're looking for a home. We try to create waivers on our end so that we can already have those ready to go for people when they come in the door. So that might be something like this animal needs to be with children 8 and up. They need to be, oh, I can't even think of anything right now. My brain's blanking. Fenced in yard has, randomly come up before. Only dog in the house. Those kind of things might come up because we've noticed behaviors or we've noticed things with them while in care that we think this thing needs to happen in order for them to be successful in a new home. And that's where those conversations happen. If they do have an 8 and up waiver, our customer service representatives are going to say, do you have any children that frequently visit the home or live in the home? And if they say, yeah, I have a 2-year-old at home, we're going to go, oh, I'm so sorry. This animal actually needs, to be with children who are 8 and up. They're a little rambunctious. We're worried about them knocking children over, or they have issues with some boundaries, and children don't have a lot of boundaries. So I don't think this is really going to work out, but here's maybe this other dog that loves kids, and try to have that conversation with them, to set them up with the best possible home, for the people and for the animal themselves. Jen, I saw you come off mute. Did you want to add to that? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna help you give some
Oh,
examples, but Sue put it in the chat there. She said medical waivers. And yes, you're absolutely right. It's not always behavioral. It's usually something that we see, like Ashley said, either medical or behavioral information that we really want to highlight and draw attention to. So that way a family knows what they're getting into and can expect what their responsibilities will be. And it's usually something more that they're going to have to do. It's not just like plug and play, animal goes into the home. Whew, that was super easy. No, they have something special going on that they're going to need to continue to manage when the animal goes home. So, again, reactivity maybe to other dogs, handling sensitivities to medical procedures, being heartworm positive, right? That's not a whoop, it's gone from the shelter and the adopter doesn't have to think about it anymore. So it's just making sure those knowns are right out in the open before someone falls in love so they can be making the best educated decision for their family when they're deciding what pet to take home.
thank you. Um, and just to add on to the fact that it is behavioral and medical, so our behavior team and our medical team help create these from what they're seeing when they're going through, kind of just those first feelers with animals, and then as they work with them a little bit longer. But they also can come from general staff as well as volunteers. If you guys, we mentioned this a lot, but if you notice things that are concerning to you, please always bring those up to your coordinators, because those may help us create waivers on animals to make sure that they're going into the proper homes. Um, Even just little things, if they add up, we can, sometimes think that, maybe they need to have a handling sensitivity because volunteers were noticing this going on. We didn't notice it when they were getting medical work, but now volunteers are noticing it. So those kind of things are really helpful for you to tell us. Um, the other thing that we do when it's discussion or conversation based is treating people as individuals. We know that not every home looks the same, not every situation looks the same. And so this is an opportunity for us to find out, like, who are you and what are you actually looking for? What type of animal are you looking for? If they're kind of unsure about what they see on the adoption floor, maybe we can help them kind of better clear up what they are actually expecting to have at home. Um, what their home life looks like and what's gonna fit best into that, and the best fit for the animal.
So really when I think about open adoptions, that's okay. I think about removing barriers um, that keep animals in shelters and out of homes. I know when I started in the org, it was more people were declined than adoptions were approved, and that can be problematic for many reasons. So I don't know if we have slides on that in the future since
Yeah.
Ashley was the one who prepped all of this, but yeah, it's really trying to look at people as like, what do you bring? And let us help you find an animal that's going to match what you're looking for. So it's a lot of conversation to do matchmaking instead of using a formal application. Because, you can say, I don't have a fence or I'm going to keep my dog in a fenced in yard. But what does that mean? We want to understand because that's not necessarily a bad thing. It could be a good thing. Some people can't even maybe have fences in their area. So that's what we're really talking about when we're talking about open adoptions.
I think I was gonna add it in later, but it fits here. So, I'm gonna just share like a little bit of a story so you guys kind of have an understanding if you haven't had a chance to really spend time with our adoption counselors, customer service workers, whatever we want to refer them to. I know adoption counselor is what we try to use as best as possible, but anybody at our front desk who's talking to our potential adopters, if you haven't had a chance to be up there a little bit, I had an instance the other day where I was just at Petco, just helping. I was just present, and a lady came in with her son, and the son really, really, really wanted this dog. And you could tell the mom was kind of like, I don't know if this is a responsibility I'm ready to take on. We do want a dog, but this dog maybe isn't what I was thinking. You could kind of read it on her face, and she seemed a little unsure when the kid was like, gung ho for this little dog. And he was like a husky mix, so he was going to have a lot of energy and things. And so I just stepped in. I'm not an adoption counselor, but I was just supporting. And I said, I asked the mom, what type of dog do you picture in your home? What are you expecting to see, when you come home and you see your dog? What does that look like? And she was like, well, he's got school and he's got a lot of extracurriculars. And I'd really like a dog that kind of can just be with us. I want him to have one. Um, and I said, well, I did take out this dog recently. And just to let he was really hyper. He's young. He was chewing on the leash and trying to pull me instead of me walking. And you could see her face being like, well, he's not going to have the time to help work with that. And that's all going to fall on me. And so I took that as an opportunity to say, you don't have to make a decision today, but there's this other dog over here that you might want to take a look at. And then I mentioned that we had other locations as well. So I'm not saying that she couldn't adopt that dog, but giving her just a better understanding of what that situation might look like, and also giving her an opportunity to kind of think about what she really is wanting to handle when adopting a dog, and just giving them a little more space and letting her know that it's okay. So I know that was me, but for the most part, that's what our adoption counselors will do, is just kind of talk through things and not pressure anybody, not give them, a yes or no always for something, but just kind of getting those wheels turning and letting them know that there are other options. Okay, so why do we use open adoption? So we already kind of mentioned this, but it helps build relationships with us actually communicating with people instead of it being all on paper forms and then they just get like an approved or denied and then they kind of don't have an idea of who we are, and that might actually leave a bad taste in their mouth if they get a denial without anybody explaining what the situation is. So it helps us to have actual face-to-face conversations with people and build trust with them. I think Jen already mentioned this, but we did begin this around 2010, working with Maddie's fund and the ideas that they have, and that forward-thinking processes for shelter environments. Um, Making the process a bit less transactional. I kind of said that with this building relationships, but it's not just like yes or no from behind a computer. It's talking with real people. And those opportunities, which I'm sure you guys know as volunteers, lead to so many other things. Even if they leave with no animal in their hand that day, they might say that they had a great experience talking with us. And they suddenly found out that we have other resources that they didn't know we had. It just creates more opportunity for us to get words out to our community as well. And this next one is a big one too. So when it comes to the care of the animals that are with us, having a little bit faster of a process can help shorten the length of stay for an animal in shelter. So hopefully that they're not experiencing kennel decline as often. If you're unfamiliar with the term kennel decline, it's essentially just some things that they might develop while they're in care with us for an extended period of time. So that might be different behavioral concerns, or just, things like refusing to eat or becoming more resource guarding. Just and being in the kennel environment is not ideal. It's lovely to an extent, but it is not a home. So we would like to move away from those as best as possible. So having a shorter process can help move those animals through into new homes quicker. And then we understand that there's no perfect home. So Jen mentioned like a yard. A good example of that is not everybody can have a yard. Not everybody's allowed to fence in their yard. That doesn't mean that they're not going to be a good parent to their animal. I lived in an apartment for most of my Australian Shepherd mix's life, and she got several walks on a trail every single day, and she's very content and in shape. So um, we can't make those determinations just by being on a piece of paper. If the application only asks, do you have a yard? And that's an immediate no. If someone doesn't, that's an opportunity missed that that animal actually maybe could have had a great life. It might just not look the way that we want it to look, or look the way that it could on a very simple form to fill out. Okay. Do I have any questions in the chat, Jen, before I keep going?
No questions yet.
All right. Feel free, guys, if at any time. Just want to make sure I stop and get those if they do pop up. Okay. So Um, so what else is there um, that might go kind of into this process of open adoption and some different things that we might have questions about when it comes to open adoption. So we already did talk through this, that different shelters and rescues have different objectives. Their goals might look different than ours. Their ideas of what they want to have happen might look different than ours. It doesn't mean it's wrong, just means it looks different for different organizations or different locations. Um, Population of animals comes into play sometimes as well. It depends on the type of animals that you have in care and what's easier to place versus harder to place versus what type of environment we live in and what the type of homes look like in the area that you live in. Um, that's something that I think we don't always take into account of sometimes shelters are in the middle of a bunch of apartments. And that's going to look different than somewhere that's out in the middle of open field space. There could be positives and negatives to both of those lifestyles. Doesn't mean it's wrong, just means that shelters and our adoption staff or whoever is working through potential adopters is going to be looking for different things. There's breed specific situations too. So I did mention I didn't mention it, but I had it written on a slide earlier that there are sometimes exceptions for us when it comes to applications. And I do like to mention this because I know we talk a lot about dogs and cats, but we do sometimes get exotics in. And those guys, not all of them, but a handful of them will have applications, like actual applications, because they're very specific of what they need to have. So I know, well, I think the last thing that I saw an application come through was an iguana, like a very large iguana, needed an application. He was on the website, but he wasn't out like in the front of Michigan Humane's lobby because we didn't want just any person who's never maybe had a reptile before be their new owner. We wanted to make sure that we could get some people who have had experience with this type of animal, contact us, have a conversation ahead of time. So when we say that there aren't any waivers, I just wanted to put that caveat there because you may hear that from time to time with something very specific. Um, but I lost my train of thought because I was going into that sudden change. But um,
Well, I was just going to add, it's still a conversation, even though we're collecting, applications for them. We're basically just trying to make sure that people who are interested in this have like thought about this, and then we call them and we have a conversation. But we're looking for a little bit of history if we can with more of our exotics because a lot goes into it. And caring for them, and most people don't understand. And so we have special team members that specialize in processing adoptions for some of our exotic animals. So when we do have parrots or iguanas or giant snakes that come in because we do get those, they tend to come through Westland. That's where our exotic department is, if you will. And there's more restrictions in the city of Detroit and what can be a pet. They go to specific staff members who are trained to be able to have those conversations with potential interested adopters. And I just wanted to add too, Ashley, if you don't mind, the difference between shelters and rescues having a different objective. And it's not just shelter or rescue, it's every organization needs to choose how they are going to operate based on their goals. And so I just wanted to point out and go a little bit in depth what Michigan Humane's goals are. We are a very large facility. It's very rare that we turn people away, or at least we don't want to. We used to be a completely open admission facility, and that meant anytime someone came to the door, which is how most municipal, so again, government run or funded animal controls run, you can't turn anyone away. And that's how Michigan Humane was when I originally started at the organization. So no matter what, whether we had a cage or not, an animal was coming into care. And as you can imagine, that can be quite problematic because if there's no cage, where does the animal go? Um, so it was about, I want to say fairly early on into my journey with Michigan. I want to say maybe 5 years after I had been there, we started talking about building a shelter medicine team because we never had veterinarians on site specifically there to be with our to care for animals. So we would have to have the clinic vets come over to see animals, and that was very problematic because that meant we were pulling away from the clients, and then clients would get behind. And it was just a really messy process. So when we started going into that, we started talking about limited admissions. And that's kind of what we are now. We operate more on a limited admission. That doesn't mean necessarily we turn people away, but we ask them to schedule an appointment to come in if they are needing our services, or we have a conversation with them before they schedule to come in so we can understand what
Oh,
their needs are.
yeah.
We have somebody who just isn't on mute. I'm sorry if you could double check. Um, but we decided to make that change because what we didn't want to do is take on more animals than we had the resources for. Because even though we are a big facility, we still struggle with the same thing that other organizations struggle with. Like animals can only go out when someone wants to adopt them. And while we have a lovely response from the community, it varies per animal. Some can be up for adoption for 2 days, some can be up for adoption for several months. And Michigan Humane doesn't want to operate with a time limit. That means every animal that comes into our care that's healthy and treatable is not going to have a time limit before they can find their way out of the shelter. So that means we needed to make sure animals were coming in, going through their assessments that we choose to do as an organization so we get to know them really well and we can make good matches, having that happen in a timely manner, getting them up to the adoption floor, and then doing everything possible to get them off the adoption floor to make more room for the animals that are coming in. So us as an organization, we choose to help many. Even though we are limited admission, we are still serving thousands of animals per year. And that is a choice we make as an organization. We did not have an open adoption process before I started working in 2010. And that, like I said, meant a lot of people were turned away.
Medicine.
And if we are turning away adopters when there is only so many homes to go around, you can only imagine how long animals would stay in our care. And what happens to animals when they stay in care too long? They start deteriorating mentally, physically, right? So we want to move animals through very quickly. So that is what our objective is, and that's why we choose to do processes like open adoption. And over the last year, we implemented the FAS scale, if you remember that, in dogs that are showing green, which means they're not showing any signs of stress. They actually don't go through an formal behavior assessment with our team. We just take the information that we have from a surrender or what we've seen with them, and they move through the process much quickly. Everything that we do is to help animals get through as quickly as we can while still keeping our staff and our volunteers safe and making good matches with the public. So, again, that's just our objective, but some objectives for some rescues is not that. They are working with 10 animals a year, maybe 100 animals a year. The size varies, depends on the group. And so that's why we look for rescue sometimes, because we have a dog that needs very specific, or cat, very specific needs, and a small rescue that is only serving 10 animals a year. They are going to be a little bit more choosy, and they may not have followed the exact same adoption process they are, but that's what works best for their organization based on their goals. So I know that's a lengthy discussion, but just kind of want to put some context back there, because what are the different objectives? Like, yeah, when it comes down to it, bare bones, adopt animals, help animals in need, adopt animals, but they get a lot more specific than that based on how your animal is trying to, how your shelter or your group is trying to serve their population of animals and their community members. And their needs are different. That's one other thing I'll add is, we used to have 3 adoption facilities, 3 main shelters, and one of them was in Rochester Hills. And a couple of years ago, we made the decision as an organization to close that facility. And the reason why is because we found that our community needed more support in the Detroit area and the surrounding Westland area. Very few animals were coming in through surrender at Rochester Hills, and the building was too small to house strays. We did not have any contracts there. So really, we spent a lot of time trying to share our resources between these three facilities when what we really needed to do is add more support to our facilities that were seeing 3 times the amount of animals coming in and needing support, community members who can't afford veterinary care. While we saw some of that at Rochester Hills, it was a much smaller portion. So that's why we made the decision to close that facility and pour more of our resources into our community that was saying, please, we're desperate. We want to keep our pets, but how do we do this without support from organizations like Michigan Humane? So, again, that's really how we are defining our objectives and our strategic goals. It's really making sure we're hearing the community's needs and making sure we're changing our plan based on what our population needs.
Mhm. Thank you, Jen. That was really, really helpful. And to kind of piggyback off that, some of these other things is us talking about that we might bring up rescues, like, so you might hear staff, like, talking about potentially sending an animal to rescue, and it's, again, having maybe some of those animals that are gonna have a harder time here or potentially spend a longer time on the adoption floor. Maybe this isn't maybe the Detroit area isn't the right area for a specific type of animal, and we partner with those rescues to see if we can send them out to other locations that maybe have the resources to spend a little more specific time with this animal than we can here. So a good example I like to use that's pretty simple, and that's why I have a border collie on this picture here, is you might notice we don't have a ton of border collies. We get them from time to time, or dogs like this. And a lot of times they don't do well in shelter. They're really high thinking dogs. They really need to be active and working with somebody. They need lots of room to run around. They are farm type dogs. So sometimes we make the determination, hey, this dog's really kind of losing it in care, and he's only been here a little while. And he needs, someone that can spend a little more quality time with him. He might do better in a fostering rescue where he can have some more specific care to make sure that he's finding the right home, or a specific, even breed specific rescue sometimes happens where they know what these specific breeds need, and can help look for those type of people a little bit, more in depth than we can. So if you ever hear someone say like, oh, they might be a good rescue candidate, or we're going to maybe send them out to rescue. That's what we're talking about, is we know that everyone kind of has those different objectives, and sometimes that works in our favor to know that those other places exist. Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit about myths. Wow, I can't even say both of those words together. Myths and misconceptions. And this is one that we hear a lot from just everyone, anybody who knows that we have an open adoption process. It's on our application for volunteers, so we get questions there a lot. And again, it's because people don't really know what that means. So one of the big misconceptions that comes through is that if we have open adoption, we can't decline adopters. And I know that that can be concerning, wondering if it's a good fit, if that's the type of person, or however, you're thinking that open adoption may cause issues. Um, so some of the things that we won't adopt out to is people we know who abuse animals. If we have a record of them, if we, have been told this through animal control or something like that, we do keep some of that information so that we have that on the backside for us. So obviously we wouldn't just be giving out pets to people that we know are, a offender in that situation. Someone who refuses to take their animal to a vet. So this can be a little bit tricky. It could happen from prior knowledge, but it also can happen again in those conversations, where if someone's flat out telling us that they won't do something to help care for their animal, that could be a determination of us saying, this isn't going to work out. Of course, we want to talk with management. We want to make sure that that's the right decision. Might take a minute for us to kind of figure that out, but we're not going to just openly give animals to people who might not care for them the way that they need to. And then we need them to be companion animals. So that's what we're looking for when we adopt out cats and dogs, with maybe the exception of our Working Whiskers Hardworking Cats programs. But those are obviously specific cats that are looking for a specific type of home. But we aren't looking for them to be used in a different capacity than being a companion animal. So I know there's a lot of little kind of caveats that come with that, with the situations of animals living outdoors. They are technically legally allowed to live outdoors in a lot of places, but that's where our field services team comes in and make sure that those are properly cared for. So I know a lot of questions can piggyback off of that companion animal context. And if you have them, please drop them in the chat. I know Jen's answering some questions right now. So if you have extended questions on that, please let us know. But essentially, we want them to be pets. We don't want them to be, used for other purposes that might harm them. So we obviously can decline those instances as well when they come up. So overall, a misconception that we can't decline people, we can. We just try to make sure that we do it logically and with enough backing that we think that that's the right decision. So the important things that we want to remember when it comes to open adoption is that education is key. So even if someone brings us some information as we're having these conversations that is a little like, oh, I don't know if they know if that's not the best thing to do, then that's where our adoption counselors come in and try and talk through, well, actually, it's best practice. I mean, gosh, an easy one that I thought of is somebody said that they were like gonna completely feed their cat milk when they adopted. And I remember the adoption counselor stepping in and being like, actually, did you know that cats don't really drink milk? And having to, have that conversation with somebody. Sometimes it's a big thing, sometimes it's not such a big thing. But that's where that talking it through with them comes into play. Because it doesn't mean that they're going to be a bad owner. It just means that they didn't have some information, and now hopefully they have it, and hopefully that can better set them up for whatever animal they adopt. We already talked about redirecting to a better fit. Again, those waivers come in handy, but if we're kind of getting the idea that maybe this isn't going to be a good fit, we can always kind of show them another animal, see if that's going to be a better fit for their home environment that we've worked through, talking with them about what that looks like. I know I mentioned this too, helping them picture what they look like in their house and asking lots of questions is a huge thing to do. To make sure that we know what they're actually expecting out of adopting this animal. And again, this isn't going to lead to us potentially declining them. It's just going to make sure that we have the right fit for whatever home environment they have as well. A couple things to know too is that people can always return animals to us. We have a return policy, but we obviously would love to take their animal back if we can outside of that return time, because we know this animal and we can give them care, and we'd rather them come back to us and be provided the care that we can have, versus trying to find a new home for them. And that could be anything. So that's why we will welcome them back if people need to return. And that's also why we have this communication with people, is because if they come across a situation where they do need to return that animal, we want them to feel like we're a welcome space for them to do that. Um, oh, I remember talking with them when I adopted, and they were just so helpful, and they told me that I could bring them back if I needed to, and they really didn't judge me for that. And so I feel okay coming back to Michigan Humane when I have to make this hard decision. That's what we want people to leave with. And this is a little rough, but you can get animals anywhere, and you can get animals for free pretty easily. So I like to think the best of people when they come into Michigan Humane. They're potentially thinking about spending money on this animal. They're coming to a reputable organization. They are making the time of their day to come out here and check and see what we have, when they could go on Facebook Marketplace and find a free puppy. It's not difficult, but they're coming to us where this animal's cared for, and it can have a conversation, they can have resources. So really, that idea that someone's going to take one of our animals and automatically do something terrible with them, if they wanted to do that, they could do it anyway. So I think a lot of people are coming in with the correct intention, if they're coming to us. And I already then kind of mentioned this, but now they have a partner, with maybe they came in and nothing worked. Maybe the dog they had their eyes set on, wasn't a good fit for their family, and they leave empty-handed, but now they have somewhere that they can return to and try again and know what the process is and know that they can chat with us on what they're looking for. Did you want to add anything, Jen? I know you were typing stuff, but
Yeah, we had a good question that came up. So I just want to go ahead because I think this goes along with kind of this slide and what we're talking about. Do we check for people who are not legally allowed to own animals? So that's a great question. And no, we do not do formal background checks, either for animal cruelty or for, like people's, like, do they live in an apartment versus do they live in a home and do they have, homeowners insurance and blah, 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 and all that stuff. Those are things that, sometimes or back in the past we had done. And I will tell you, we spent a lot of time doing all these extra steps and making people bring in proof of this and proof of that. And it really is a barrier to adoption because 99% of the time, most people who are coming into our facilities are good people looking to get an animal. And if they are not being honest, again, which is rare, it's because they've already had some of sort of experience where they feel like they can't trust the shelter because they will be declined from getting an animal. This is a lot of why open adoptions exist and why we choose as an organization to take this route because it goes along with our core values. Um, and so what we find is when we ask questions and remove judgment, like don't immediately assume like, hey, this person is going to have to prove to me why they are a good home for an animal. And we just ask questions like, tell us about what you're looking for. Why are you interested in this particular animal? What does your home look like? Tell me about what your yard is. Do you have a plan for doggy daycare? Like, it's all question based when we're talking about our open adoption process. The more information we get from a potential adopter without them having a fear of what they're going to say for being judged, the more honest they are with us and the better job we can do of helping them match with the right animal. Back in the day, when I first started at Michigan Humane, yeah, people would say all kinds of crazy stuff like, "Oh yeah, I take my animal to the vet. What's the animal's name? What's the vet's name?" That one on down the blah. They don't know. And it's just because they're worried about their old cat that they have in a home that isn't vaccinated and they're thinking about bringing another one in. And we might be like, oh, they don't vaccinate their cat. But actually, there is a reason why. Their cat was old, it's had bad vaccine reactions, it never goes outside, they take really good care. Their vet gave them permission to not stress out their old cat anymore from bringing it in to get vaccines. Like it's been vaccinated whole life, it's got immunities in its body, it's going to be fine. That is a decision that an owner should be able to make, a pet owner between them and their veterinarian. We are not the judge and jury. We don't get to decide what every home looks like because we're not in it and we don't have the context. So, no, we don't specifically go and do those checks. But again, we train our staff in such a way to ask questions to bring out information. So I mentioned in my response to Lisa, if we got a red flag, like, and it's been a minute since I've had to process these, but I promise you, I have had these real conversations in real life with potential adopters. But you can tell when someone, you're asking a question, they give you an answer, and they're telling you things that are like concerning. Well, yeah, I work like 15 hours a day and the puppy's going to have access to a doggy door. And yeah, I really haven't thought about where he would be, if it rains or something like that. Then that prompts a conversation. We're not going to tell them, how dare you give your puppy a doggy door? What if it's a husky? Husky puppies probably would appreciate being able to go in and out of the yard, especially if it's fenced with a privacy fence. Maybe we're going to have a conversation with that gentleman. He's going to come home on his lunch break, or he knows, like, oh, yeah, shoot, inclement weather, I need to come home. Or maybe he's going to create, something in the house that's going to be okay there for that dog to be safe. So those are what we're talking about when we see flag situations. Most of it, like Ashley said, is education. Once you have a conversation with a person and you get them thinking, they're like, oh yeah, like Ashley said, no, I really don't want to deal with a husky that's going to pull me down when I'm walking in. It's going to bite the leash and my son's not going to spend any time. If you're doing it right as an adoption counselor, you're helping people come to their own decisions of what's right or wrong for them. You're just giving them information. and then they're making their own decisions. It's rare that we actually have to decline. It does happen, but it's again, it's people like, yeah, I would never take my animal to the vet. I've had animals my whole life, and I like to just let them die at home in peace. You know, sometimes people say stuff like that. It's rare. It's out there. If someone said that, then we would decline them from adoption. And then it would go into our system. And then if they came back to meet an animal, by the time we started processing it and finding their information in the system, that's a conversation where a manager would be pulled in and we would have an honest conversation. The other thing that I can think of having to decline someone is because they said that they were going to have a dog to live outside as a guard dog. They didn't want a companion animal. They wanted it to be outside. It was only for protection. But then I've had other conversations with people where they still wanted a dog to help them feel protected and safe, but it was also going to be a companion animal. So again, there's a lot of nuance into these situations, and that's why we have these conversations and train our adoption counselors to ask questions. And if they ever get stuck, that's where they tap on their manager's shoulder, or they have mentors who are senior staff that kind of walk them through this. It doesn't mean open adoption doesn't mean everyone gets an animal, but it means we're trying to have conversations with people and help them choose animals that are right. Because we don't know. I've been proven wrong before about a dog that I thought wasn't going to be a good fit for someone who didn't want to come to the shelter, didn't want to do a meet and greet with their dog, with a dog that we had that was kind of iffy with other dogs. They took it home. Couple weeks went by. That lady came back, showed pictures of these two dogs living their best, happiest life together. And she knew her dog best. She's like, if I bring my dog to the shelter, it's going to be the meet and greet's going to go terrible. My dog doesn't do this. It can't do this. This is too scary. So, we respected it, and it really really worked out. So, hopefully that answers your question about the digging we do, but really we trust people with their word, cuz like Ashley said, if they really want to get an animal, they're going to get it somewhere. And so we rather have an opportunity to have a conversation and try to change their mindset than them just leave angry and go somewhere else and then maybe mistreat an animal. But the people who actually want to mistreat an animal are very far and few in between. Um, and so we want to just remove those barriers to get the animals moving out and have that potential home. I mean, kennel decline, as we're treating more and more behavior issues, more and more medical issues, those animals need to get out and quicker from the shelter as soon as possible. Um, because we see it sometimes. They're there and they're happy, and then it's just been too much stress. And then that animal doesn't make it out. So we rather have a chance, an opportunity in a home for that animal to succeed, and then wait too long and not have an opportunity and a chance.
Yeah, perfect. That's great. I know we're getting close to time, but I do want to make sure that we touch on um, how you guys can help. Good. I'm glad it's next slide so we can talk about it. Because obviously you guys aren't processing adoptions, but there are a lot of things that you can do to be a part of this and help make this process more understood and goes more smoothly. So be an advocate, just being aware of what open adoption is when those questions come up and people have, a funny taste in their mouth. Hopefully we gave you some information to make it a little more palatable and understanding of what this actually looks like, that we're not just handing out animals willy-nilly, that we're still doing things in process to make sure that those animals are going into proper homes. And we have reasons why we have this type of process in play. Helping answer questions if you come across people that have questions about what open adoption means. And having faith in people, I think, is a big thing. Is that's exactly what Michigan Humane has helped me with a lot, is learning this process and learning what people actually expect from adopting an animal, working our events and learning from the people themselves. I know that's down here, but this last bullet says come to our events is something you can do. If you haven't been to our events, either adoption events or our One Health events, just to talk to the community. It is a beautiful thing, and it is really eye-opening when it comes to understanding who's living in your community and what their life looks like and how much they genuinely really love their animals. Um, there's not a single One Health I leave without some kind of a story that really hits me. So definitely, if you haven't had a chance, I recommend coming out to those. Going back up though is checking your prejudices and biases. So this is a pretty difficult one. I know it's sometimes hard to analyze yourself and what you're thinking. But if you are, say you're at the shelter and someone wants to adopt and they're kind of rubbing you the wrong way, and you're like, I don't know if they should take that animal home. I really love that animal. Take a step back and ask yourself why you're feeling that icky feeling. Is it something that you are noticing that's, actually going to be an issue, or is it something that's your own bias? Does that person not, talk the way that you would talk about animals? Or do they maybe have some misconceptions, but they're not actually super harmful? Just taking a moment to check our own prejudices and biases can be a huge help in understanding that other people's lives are different than ours. Money and lifestyle does not equate to proper care. Um, we know at Michigan Humane, tons and tons of people who are on the cusp of being unhoused or are unhoused, and they would lay their life down for their animals and make sure that they have everything that they need. And we also know that there are people who have lots and lots of money, and that animal's left alone all the time or is not treated nicely. It is again, a bias of ours to think that you need money to properly care for an animal. Not saying that people shouldn't have money to have animals. They definitely should. That they are costly. But that's not something that we should jump to automatically because we know that somebody maybe doesn't have the lifestyle that we have or would like that animal to go home to. That does not mean they're not going to be loved. So again, just taking a step back and realizing our own thought processes when situations happen. And then, of course, I know it's not written on here, but of course, you can always talk to your coordinators. Any of us, Kellen and Allie, myself and Jen, are always more than happy to have conversations if something sits wrong with you about an adoption or a situation or an event or whatever is going through your head. You guys know that our door is open. Please set up a meeting with us, and we'd love to clear our time out and sit down and have that conversation with you and let you get your thoughts and feelings out and see if we can help you with those. So please always do that. And I know it's 2:01, but do I have any other questions? I'm so sorry, guys. We went a little bit over, so I just want to make sure if you have any more questions, please, you can drop them in the chat, or if anybody needs to come off, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so we can do that real quick. Okay, I'm here. Jen, do we have any other questions in there? Okay, she's typing away. If anybody needs to come off mute and wants to ask a question, please feel free.
Sorry, I'm just trying to answer
Okay.
questions in the chat too, since we're at close to time. But this was another great question. Again, if anyone has to jump off, that's okay. We can share some of these in the follow up if you want. But someone asked, is it recorded in our system if someone has been declined for an animal previously? And the answer to that is yes. We always take notes. Every animal, every person, everything that happens is documented in our animal database. So everyone gets a person record, everyone gets an animal record. So we track all of those things: adoption, surrender, if they have to bring in an animal for euthanasia, the reasons why. So we have a quite the database. Um, it's very rare, again, that we do actually need to decline someone from ever adopting with Michigan Humane. It's usually more not this animal because this isn't a good fit. Can we direct you over here? But if we did, those notes would be in there. It would pop up if someone looked to adopt again. A manager would be brought over. They would have that conversation with the guest. Our managers meet, our animal care managers meet weekly. They talk about the animal populations and any weird things that are going on. In the past, when we did have someone who was maybe interested in an animal that shouldn't have been, we changed the animal's name, we moved it to another location. There are ways around it, but in general, we see good people coming to adopt. We used to do background checks specifically for people who are interested in our bully breeds because they're more high risk for people wanting them for the wrong reasons. And I will tell you, after years and years of doing that, I never once had any information come back about cruelty or neglect or any animal abuse that would have stopped us from processing an adoption. So I want to say, like 2 or 3 years ago, decided to get rid of that process. It was a beautiful thing. It was a waste of time to do it. It took more time to get our customers who were good people in and out of the door. And, it turned people off. It made adopting pit bulls more scary than it needed to be, right? You need a background check me? And there are places that ask for references and you have to call their vet and all those things. Those are all things we did as an organization, and we've moved away from all of them. Most people are honest, and we really care more about moving our animals out of the system in a timely manner. We trust them with we trust humans with trust and respect. We want to treat them with respect is what I wanted to say. So just wanted to share that. There's more in the chat if anybody is reading it, but that was a great question. Again, if someone is declined, they are noted. We will know, but we are not connected to any other database. But if an animal control officer also, because we do work with some of those in Westland, and someone wasn't allowed to own pets or their animals were being taken away or whatever is happening, if they're being prosecuted, yes, that information is shared to us. It belongs in our database. Animals are marked. So we certainly are not just turning a blind eye and letting animals be neglected and abused. If you've ever heard Matt Pepper talk on this subject, you know that animal abuse is really, really important to him, and making sure that animals are treated humanely in our community, especially because when animals are abused, it's more likely that humans are also being abused in the home. And, we don't want any human or animal to feel that and be stuck in those situations. So these are all really, really great questions. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one. I have one, Jennifer. Um, this is Jan. Uh, this is similar to, uh, oh, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. Okay. Um, the other day I thought I saw someone come in as a potential, who was looking for an animal for his kids. And he seemed, under the influence, let's just say.
Mhm.
Uh, what do you do in those types of situations? It really bothered me a lot.
Yeah. So if you notice it, you don't necessarily need to approach the adopter directly. I would discreetly find a member of the management team, or you can come to me or Kellen and let us know what you've seen and what your concerns are. And then we will discreetly go to the manager if you're not talking to them directly, but then we will handle that situation.
Okay.
Usually, what happens is a manager then approaches, assesses the situation. We decide, how much harm is being done, because sometimes we can have a conversation with the person if they're just a little under the influence and invite them to come back later. But if someone is really being inappropriate, we've asked people to leave our facility before. Sometimes, too, we have members of the public that come in that are looking to adopt that might have cognitive impairments or disabilities. So sometimes we're looking out for that, too. It's not necessarily that they're under the influence. But then, same thing, usually a manager or a senior staff member gets involved in that and kind of helps our less senior staff go through that process and assess. You're a little bit doing damage control. You don't want to make a big scene and embarrass someone, or call attention to something to have a big blow up that's not great for others in the shelter. But also we want to make sure that everyone else's time and the animals are safe and protected. So if you ever feel uncomfortable about anything, please bring it forward. Don't feel like you just have to sit with that, and definitely don't feel like you should go and address that. Bring it to even if there's just another staff member around, they can get a manager to help them, because most likely they're not necessarily going to know how to deal with it right off the bat. So it does happen from time to time. I mean, it is an open adoption floor. Anyone can come in anytime, but usually, yes. I can't say there's like a specific protocol other than get a manager, and then the manager starts assessing that situation and making a decision based on, the information they're getting in that particular moment. Is
That's
that
helpful.
helpful? Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
once or twice I have had to escort some people off the property. Not often, but it has happened before.
That's so funny just thinking of somebody uh getting drunk or something and what they want to do is come see animals.
mean, I guess there are worse things they could do. So
Right. Any other questions, you guys? Anything else? And if you don't think of it now, please feel free to email one of us. We'd be happy to answer your questions if you come up with something later. And we will be sending out the recording and some resources, like always, after probably tomorrow. You'll get an email like that. So, okay. All right. Well,
thank
if
you.
there's nothing else, thank you guys so much. I hope you learned some things, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. You are free to go.
Thank you.
Thank you.